Well, I want to focus on the future for Pennsylvania. Let's talk all about how we can get a dispensary license in Pennsylvania in the not too distant future, Patrick. Are you pretty familiar with the bills that are floating on around in the Pennsylvania legislature?
Yes, I am. Right now, the Pennsylvania medical marijuana market is closed. All 50 licenses have been awarded. All 25 grower processor licenses have been awarded, but one has been revoked. That's the subject of litigation right now. And what I read from the Department of Health is that that license will be made available in a phase 3 application process. The two bills that I like, we've got two competing bills. Here in Pennsylvania, we have a system, a state store system of distributing alcoholic beverages.
Mhm.
If you want to purchase liquor, if you want to purchase wine, you're going through a state store. And Republicans in Pennsylvania have long wanted to privatize our state store system. So some are talking about a grand bargain where we privatize the state store system, but then the state takes over distribution of retail cannabis. Essentially, the state becomes the dispensary. I personally don't care for that. I don't think the state store system works very well, and I certainly don't want the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania now setting the prices for my cannabis. The other bills, House Bill 2050 and Senate Bill 350, would not utilize the state store system. Senate Bill 350 would provide an unlimited number of licenses, let the market decide. But what Senate Bill 350 also does is it would provide for tiered licenses so that small farmers, small businesses would not get squeezed out by, the likes of, you're from Chicago, Cresco Labs. My wife is, the community outreach coordinator for Cresco here in Pittsburgh. So, I understand that it is a major corporate cannabis entity. And if it could, it would be happy to dominate the marketplace.
Oh, yeah.
And our bill sponsors understand that. They know that. They know that, Cresco and Harvest and whomever have a role to play in large scale cannabis cultivation. But they also know that, the medical system, kind of cut out, small businesses. They cut out the small Pennsylvania farmer. And that's being something that is a key component in Senate Bill 350 and House Bill 2050.
Awesome. So with these bills that are in Pennsylvania for the adult use cannabis, for the dispensary license, do they have any restrictions on the number of dispensary licenses that will be awarded, or like the number that I can have? Can I get like 100 dispensary licenses, or how is that setting up?
Under Senate Bill 350, there's no restriction to the number of licenses that would be available, but the bill doesn't specifically speak to whether or not a large corporate cannabis entity would be restricted specifically on the number of licenses. I am quite sure that that would be language coming forward. In House Bill 2050, it artificially caps the number of licenses available at 300. And I think that that was just a placeholder, as that bill would be further developed if it was able to go through the committee hearing process. But both prime sponsors are aware that they don't want to simply create a monopoly for large cannabis, but put a system in place that benefits all Pennsylvanians, and to make sure that, hey, we've got 12.5 million people in Pennsylvania, perhaps up to 2 million adult use consumers. So, we've got to be able to supply that demand as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, since we're going to talk about supply and demand, then we can switch the conversation from the retail side to, all right, let's talk about the different types of marijuana grow licenses that are available under SB 350. So you mentioned that the legislative bill striates the number of, or in tiers, the number of, or the size of the cultivation facilities. So I know that they start with a micro grower. What's a micro grower facility under SB 350?
100 plants or less.
Yeah, that is a micro grow. And then do they have restrictions on how they can grow those 100 plants?
Not in the bill itself. It doesn't go into that level of regulatory detail.
What are the requirements, Patrick? And I'm always curious, for each state, for licenses, do you have to be a state resident?
In Pennsylvania, you do not. There was no residency restriction whatsoever. I was actually on a team that made application for licenses in West Virginia, and West Virginia had a residency requirement, and then that got struck down by West Virginia Supreme Court. Wow. So We have no residency restrictions. However, what I'm hoping is that, as these bills move forward, and as we have a realistic discussion, let's have some incentives built in that will benefit Pennsylvanians, that will benefit those with Pennsylvania partners. What we saw with our medical licensing is that there were a lot of out-of-state entities, Cresco, for example, Harvest, Moxie, and others that had local Pennsylvania partners, but they didn't have to have local Pennsylvania partners if they didn't want to. It's just in a state like Pennsylvania, it made a lot of sense to have someone who is from the community, who is able to work with the local politicians, understood the real estate, understood the Pennsylvania's geography, to partner with these companies.
Yep. We always say all cannabis is local. And so it's really important because those outer state, operators may have some real smarts and acumen in the industry, but if they don't have those local partners, I just don't think that they're going to be looked as friendly or as well upon. For the other types of cannabis cultivation licenses in Pennsylvania, after the micro grower, what's the next level up?
I believe it goes 100 to either 500 or 1,000, and then perhaps 5,000 as a cap for the tiered licenses. And I think that we're talking about capping, larger commercial grows at 100,000 square feet of canopy space.
Well, that's heads or tails. I mean, that's something that I always talk about in these types of canopy trade-off things, because what is the canopy space defined as? Does that include my clones? Does that include my mothers? Does that include my veg room? Or is the canopy space only the flowering canopy space? Yeah. And then the other one, well, go ahead. Let's see if you know the answer to that one then.
Right now, I think that when it comes to the medical side of it, we don't have canopy space restrictions. The Department of Health has said, to alleviate product shortages or to try to bring prices down, expand your facilities. And Cresco is now up to 88,000 square feet. And I believe that what they consider canopy space is actual plants that are under lights and flowering. That would not include the clone or the mothering room.